Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reverend Dr. Rodney Sadler, and I'm pleased that you're joining us today for an Israeli-Palestinian Peace Symposium. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to really get to the bottom of all that's been going on in recent days. Much of what's going on has been a conflict that's been brewing for far too long and that needs an end. And today we're going to talk about some myths, some concerns that many of us have had for a long time that we never knew the answers to. We want to wrestle with some of those myths and find a solution to them. What's the actual truth behind them? And in addition, we want to also spend some time trying to think about ways that we can move forward, maybe pressure the Biden government, the U.S. Congress, to say the people that are in charge of these nations, Israel, Palestine, need to come back to the table, need to have negotiations, and need to work towards a just peace. That's what we're looking for today, a just peace. I, the other day, wrote an article where I suggested that I refuse to choose sides. I refuse to choose sides with the Israelis. I refuse to choose sides with the Palestinians because everybody deserves their land. Everybody deserves their autonomy. Everybody deserves peace and security and freedom. But I've changed my opinion in recent days. I think we need to choose sides. I think we need to choose sides with humanity. No more useless bloodshed. I think we need to choose sides with equality, that everyone's life is equally valuable. I think we need to choose the sides of justice, that everyone has equal rights, and these equal rights must be protected. I think we need to choose the side of peace, shalom, peace. I study biblical law, and in the Hebrew Bible, shalom really doesn't mean just peace as in quiet or peace as in not fighting directly. It means wholeness, completeness. That kind of wholeness and completeness cannot exist if there is something that has been broken, something that is unjust. That which has been broken needs to be repaired. Tikkun olam, we need to restore that brokenness. I choose the side of love, that creative goodwill that seeks the best of all. Now, I know that many of us have to choose sides. We've been given sides by our very identities. We've been given perspectives that have taken over our imaginations. But I want to suggest that we should stand in solidarity with those great ideals I just mentioned. These ideals deserve our allegiance. Perhaps more than those ideals is the God who created us all. All of us on this screen today are adherents of faiths that are focused on the same creator. Whether we're Jewish or Christian or Muslim, we all have the same notion of a common creator who from the dust formed us all and breathed into us the breath of life, and we became animated beings. All of us who bear God's breath deserve to be respected and loved and cared for. I just want to let you know as we get started that this is the side I choose, and this is the side I advocate for each and every one of you. Today, as we have a conversation, I'm asking that the conversation that we have be governed by these ideals, that we all work for humanity, that we all work for justice and peace, and focus on issues of love, that we treat each other with kindness, and we represent a different way forward. Everyone that's here today believes that peace is possible. Everyone that's here today believes that we can achieve it. So let's begin a process that will work towards bringing our leaders to bring the leaders of Israel and Palestine to the table to work finally for that just peace. Thank you all. I'm going to turn it over now to Fatima so that she can address us all. God bless. Fatima.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Sadler. That was beautiful. Hello, my name is Fatma Argan, and I'm honored to be here today to present the following invocation. As a Turkish American, a Muslim, the Arlington Democrats chair of the Interfaith Outreach and Advocacy Caucus, which stands for bringing together communities. As a humanitarian, a peacemaker in my community, and a very proud member of this beloved community. We come together as a beloved community of Israelis, Palestinians, and Americans to continue the hard work of promoting a just and sustainable peace. We undertake to listen to each other with heart ears and speak with love speech. We undertake to communicate with civility, respect, love, empathy, dignity, and compassion to include and enfranchise all. We are lighting a torch that will be noticed in the White House. And now I'd like to read a short poem from a 13th century poet, Jalaluddin Rumi, who some of you may know. Rumi's poetry is universal for a number of different reasons. This is a poet that was born in Afghanistan, wrote in Persian, and lived and spent his last days in what is now modern Turkey. So he's beloved by a number of different nations for good reason. His poetry speaks to divine love, and it gets at the heart of inner peace, but I think it's equally applicable to peace on many levels. So I'll just read you one of his poems, which I hope will set the stage for all of our wonderful speakers to come. A divine dance appears in the soul and the body at the time of peace and union. Anyone can learn the dance. Just listen to the music. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank our gracious hosts for this event. And I also want to welcome Secretary of State Blinken to Israel and Palestine. Today he was in Jerusalem and Ramallah, working for exactly what we're talking about today. So welcome to all of our viewers around the world for this first symposium of the Israeli-Palestinian Peace Symposium series. We, the organizers and speakers, see you as active participants, although we cannot offer you a microphone. Your participation begins with your listening to those of us from Israel and the Palestinian territories, and then spreads by you passing it on. We will be speaking from the heart and trying to empower you to encourage the Biden-Harris administration to get our leaders to put their negotiators back at the negotiation table. We progressives in Israel and Palestine are asking you Americans for your help. It's not America forcing its way into a battle zone. So after months of planning and 4 years of neglect, we coincidentally begin immediately after the horrors of battle we've seen and felt in the past weeks. Our houses are exploding, our streets are in chaos, and our souls are mourning. We will not play the role of the leaders or their negotiation teams. We will be telling our own personal stories and our own reasons why we believe that peace is possible and it's the only way. We are one-staters, two-staters, and others, all with one belief. Peace is possible and it's the only way. We warn you, we might use certain words or terms that sound inflammatory or insulting to some. I guarantee you that none of us have any such intent. As Brother Rodney said in those inspiring words, we speak with love speech. We apologize if something one of us said has caused either pain or anger. Among applicable touchy words are terrorist, Zionist, apartheid, occupation, and more. One person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter or soldier, and vice versa. We all agree to disagree, and we'll be careful, but not necessarily perfect in sticking to our guidelines. We have taken measures to ensure allowing speakers, including Palestinians and Israelis, Jews and Arabs, Americans, women and men, in short, to represent all who are active in working for peace. We will introduce you to some of the over 150 organizations and activist groups that consistently work for a mutual future between Jews and Arabs in Israel and the Palestinian territories. Jews and Arabs refuse to be enemies. We will present The other side of the Israeli-Palestinian reality you almost never see or hear about. CNN, CBS, MSNBC, and other American networks won't show you any more than the tip of the iceberg. And you can't be expected to take university courses to learn about it all. We hope that you are energized by our presentations. Hope you will tell your senators and representatives to encourage President Biden to prioritize Israel-Palestine urgently. Please invite friends who can influence the House of Representatives and Senate to join future monthly symposia. Each of our speakers will have 3 minutes to make an opening statement and then have more time to answer questions and address the words of the other speakers. They have chosen their own words, and those do not necessarily represent the views of anyone else or the organizers of this symposium. We thank each and every one of you for your participation. There are also some influential and well-known viewer participants among you. We're honored to have you all with us. Please don't keep us a secret. We ask that you keep the chat quiet and don't get into arguments so you can hear our speakers. This isn't a contest, and we need your attention. Now, let us embark on our meaningful process. We hope you find it interesting and inspiring. Distinguished speakers, the microphone is yours. Thank you.
Hi, I am Joel Siegel. Thank you, Moshe. Shalom and salam alaikum to all of you, to all my extended family who are listening and watching this critically important symposium today. I've been involved in the Middle East peace process for many years, mainly through my work in Congress. I worked for Representative John Conyers from 2000 to 2013. Now, why do I believe we need a re-energized Middle East peace process, a new energized movement for a final status agreement sign? Is because it's real simple. I love my Jewish family in Israel. I love my Palestinian and Arab family living both in Israel and Palestine. And I want my extended family in Israel and Palestine to live together in mutual coexistence, peace, harmony, and security, and to live in communities where there's jobs, justice, freedom, plain and simple. And whatever I can do, whatever you can do to make this happen, please join us. We hope in our symposium series, we're going to do them monthly. We hope to expand a critical mass of people who believe in a particular wing of the movement, which is very simple. We want to have an impact on U.S. foreign policy with Israel and Palestine so that it is fair, even-handed, equitable, and successful. Now, in my work in Congress, I saw a few things that I must be honest about if we're going to solve this tragic conflict. After years of working with the PLO and the Palestinian Authority, I am 100% convinced that if American progressive Jews begin to speak out vociferously for the cause of a just peace between Israel and Palestine, there is an increased chance that the Biden administration and Congress will do the right thing and bring both sides of the conflict to the peace table. Now, one thing I saw that bothered me when I was in Congress was when the ambassador of the PLO from Israel to the United States wanted to meet with members of Congress, he was blocked by staffers. That's not fair. We need an even-handed foreign policy. And what we're hoping to do is build that critical mass starting today to have that impact. Now, a lot of people will say, well, what's President Biden have to do with peace between Israel and Palestine? What's the Congress? Well, everything, because of the funding that our government provides to Israel. And we have been brokers in the past for an Israeli-Palestinian peace. I'll close by saying the reason why I'm an optimist is if you look at the history of peace, peace has been made when people didn't think that it would be made. Israel struck a peace deal with Egypt, with Jordan. There's been a Palestinian Authority since Oslo. I never thought I would see the Berlin Wall come down. I didn't think I'd see a black president in my lifetime named Barack Obama. And I've also seen whenever the odds were against a movement for peace or justice, when you didn't think it was going to work out, it did work out when you got organized, when you had a theory of change that made sense, and when you were respectful and kind and loving. And this is one issue where we're going to have to be unified. Thank you so much. I am so honored to be a co-moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Joel Siegel. Joel Siegel will be my co-host today and help moderate the panel discussion. So grateful for his presence as always. He is the muse of social justice, I say. We're going to sing together a chorus of justice, love, and peace as we move towards a greater day. I'm going to start off with introducing our illustrious panel. Our panel is wonderful, a balanced group of people from various perspectives who are all singing the same song today about peace. I'll introduce each of them, and after I introduce each of them, they will each give a 3-minute statement to open up the conversation. I'm going to start off today with Zuhair Balu. Zuhair is a former member of the Knesset from the Labour Party. He is an Arab community icon, a sports broadcaster, and journalist. I just have to ask you, what do you think about the Philadelphia Eagles' chances of success this year as we get started? No, I'm just joking. Please.
Thank you, and I'm very, very pleased and very happy to participate in this video conference in this time and in this timing, because I want to remind all of you that we just finished one more war between the Hamas and Israel, and we had over and over and time after time wars and confrontation between the both sides without time. We have every time a freeze frame, and nobody can win within the war and within the confrontation and within the tension. I am Palestinian and I am also Israeli. My relatives is in Gaza, in the West Bank, and my friend, my warm friend, is in Israel. I am not hating anytime the Jewish people. I think the Jewish people is my partner. The partnership between us can create everything, because Israel is a very successful country in the region and in the world. But it's impossible to agree that my nation and my relatives are living without homeland, without independence, without hope, without vision, because the situation between the both sides is very bad situation. And I am repeating every time this, that if my neighbor has a bad feeling, I have a bad feeling, and you cannot maintain this frame and this reality between the both sides forever. Something should and could and must happen. When we are speaking now, Mr. Anthony Blinken are visiting our homeland, and this is a very, very expensive opportunity to do something. And I think President Biden, he has a very good will in order to make a solution between the both sides. It's not in the sky, it's not impossible, but we need the involvement of the United States of America in order to make our life change to the positive position between the both sides. I have one term in the Knesset of Israel, and I tried everything in order to change our life, but I failed. I admit that I am failed because the situation between the both sides cannot give us the opportunity to do something in order to change something. And we, the Arab citizens in Israel, had a very worse law in the Knesset when I was a Knesset member of the Knesset. The law bill, the national bill between the Israeli nation and the Arab nation inside Israel. I am not speaking now about the relationship between the both sides, the mutual relationship between the Palestinian and the Israel outside Israel, but I'm speaking about the status of the Arab inside Israel. And we had this law, and we are suffering about the status about us. So if somebody can engage our brain in order to create a new agreement, peace agreement between the both sides, this is a win-win for all the people, for all the communities inside Israel, outside Israel, and I am looking for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zuhair. I really appreciate your words of compassion, peace, and siblinghood for all the people who are in the land. Our next speaker is Michael Rosen. She is a former member of the Knesset from the Meretz Party, the former executive director of the Association of Crisis Centers for Victims of Sexual Assault, and I offer you 3 minutes.
Thank you, and hi everyone. I would like to start by pointing out the obvious. I'm committed to a two-state solution, and I'm sure this is the only possible solution at this time. However, I would like to say a few difficult things about the situation and hopefully sum up my remarks with a bit of cautious optimism. In the past 2 weeks, we witnessed a slippery slope in the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, Hamas rocket attacks on Israel cities, Israeli military strike in Gaza, and rising intercommunal violence between Arabs and Jews is profound and has future implications. The first argument I want to make is that the last military conflict between Israel and Hamas is entirely the result of a deep political crisis on both Israeli and Palestinian sides. In Israel, 4 election campaign in 2 years, and high chance for a 5th election campaign soon. Netanyahu worked to eliminate the possibility of forming a government without him, which was difficult to implement in the first place, and following the round of fighting and especially the riots in the mixed cities in Israel, impossible to implement. Netanyahu, in his action or the lack of them, in dealing with the confrontation during Ramadan in East Jerusalem, Sheikh Jarrah crisis, strengthened extremists as Ben Gvir and his troops, he handed Hamas the matches. But on the other Palestinian side also, Abbas took advantage of Israel's decision not to allow election to the Palestinian Authority to take place in East Jerusalem to cancel the PA election entirely. This created interior Palestinian tension. Almost all other Palestinian electoral lists, including Hamas, rejected his decision and suspected that the real motive was Abbas' realization that he could lose. Hamas hopes to reintegrate itself into the formal political process failed. The results are severe and should not be ignored. Netanyahu has strengthened Hamas over the years and weakened the Palestinian Authority. He gives achievement to Hamas, rewarding violence and blocking option for negotiation with the PA, and did everything in his power to prevent the two-part Hamas and PA to merge. As such, Hamas will emerge from the last conflict stronger, and the Palestinian Authority and Abbas weaker. As a result, it will not be easy to keep the West Bank out of the next conflict. The second difficult consequences is the symbolic role of Jerusalem, and more of that, the religious dimension of the conflict. The third outcome and most worrying is the loss of confidence in the ability to resolve the crisis in a non-military way. People in Israel, Jews and Arabs, are reluctant to believe in peace, and in Arab-Jewish coexist in Israel right now. So what I see in the future and why I'm still optimistic for the two-state solution. Over the years, all surveys and polls in Israel and Palestine have shown a clear majority of support for the two-state solution and sees it as the only solution. The left should continue to lead and to present a clear alternative. We can't despair. We need to organize. Our work doesn't stop with a ceasefire waiting for the next cycle of violence. In fact, our real work just starts now. Thank you.
Michael, I have to say thank you so much for that wonderful charge and that reminder that the work really does begin now. Our next speaker is Ms. Hiam Tanous. She works with Women Wage peace. I love that. Wage peace. She's a former education counselor at the Israeli Ministry of Education and teaches at the University of Haifa, a beautiful city that I've often wanted to live in myself. I turn it over to you, Hiyam. You have.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. In spite of our hard feelings, I want to talk about what we are doing, we Women Wage Peace. So I'm Hiyam Tanous, an Arab woman from Haifa, Israel, and I believe that now peace is possible and it's the only way and very necessary now. I'm a member of Women Wage Peace, a grassroots movement with tens of thousands of members from the right, center, and left of the political spectrum, Jews and Arabs, religious and secular, united in the demand for a mutually binding, non-violent agreement between Israelis and Palestinians involving women in the process in the spirit of UN Resolution 1325. As I mentioned before, I grew up in a very nice neighborhood where we lived together in one building, Jews, Muslims, and Christians. I never saw myself different from Rachel, my Jewish friend, or Samira, my Islamic friend. We played together, laughed at the same jokes, living a healthy and nice childhood. Nobody talked politics at all. People were confused and scared. My first reminiscence of the Palestinian Nakba started when I was 10 years old, and I used to wake up at the middle of the night at the sobs of my grandmother, weeping her two daughters, which were expelled in the 48th. But while growing up and merging with the Israeli society, meeting people, talking about our conflict, I came to realize that peace is possible, that human beings are the most precious creatures on earth, and that God Almighty gave us the blessing and opportunities to listen, to discuss, and to reconcile, and to learn to live together. In October 2016, while I was watching the TV, I saw the March of Hope of Women Wage Peace, which culminated in a rally of more than 30,000 women at the Dead Sea, a march which united women throughout the country, the Palestinian Authority region, and world around one message, that despair is not an option and that only a political agreement will bring true security to our region. We believe that women who gave birth and life should do everything in order to keep that life. The voice of women should be loud and assertive this time. Since I was born, I have been through so much operations in the region. The name just changed. The women from the deep despair of the multiple wars, we have the responsibility to reclaim hope and a viable future for our children, to reach an honorable and acceptable political agreement to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Our careful, inclusive language, with our mandate of no blaming and no shaming, will heal our bruises and will open a channel of communication between both sides. Peace is not an utopia. It is the necessary foundation for the lives of the two people in this place, in security and freedom. Our movement works through the country to raise awareness and engage the public in a discussion about the feasibility of political resolution. It creates opportunities for dialogue with individuals and groups through formal and informal meetings within the community. The movement also organizes national events such as demonstrations and protests. The last one was last Wednesday, where more than 1,000 women attended. Next year, we are planning an international conference in the Middle East to influence and to pressure decision makers toward reaching a viable peace agreement. To end my word, we women in Israel-Palestine ask you to wage peace with us by telling your senators, congressmen, and women, and anyone who can encourage the Biden administration to please get leaders together to restart negotiations and end our violence. Together, we are responsible to end this bloody circle, restore the lives of our children from both sides, and strive for a better and more secure future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hiyam. Your words are brilliant, and far too often, the woman's voice has been left out of this conversation, and we see what the end result of that is. May the woman's voice become prominent, and may we finally work our way towards peace. Our next speaker is a brilliant man. He is our leader with the Israeli-Palestinian Symposium group here. He is Moshe Chertoff. He is also a social, political, and peace activist. Love to hear from you, Moshe. I'll give you 3 minutes to lift us higher. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Rodney. I am Moshe Chertoff, and I believe that peace is possible and the only way. I've been working with the leaders of our Meretz party for nearly a decade about developing stronger collaboration with you and the left in the USA. Did you know that Bernie Sanders won the 2020 primary election among Democrats voting in Israel, who actually have delegates in the Democratic Convention? You never heard a word about it, did you? I referred to Likud voters in Israel and Republicans in the USA as one entity, Likudnikans. American Likudnikans are so more organized in their support of the Israeli right than you are in your support of the Israeli left. We absolutely need your support. Likudnikans support illegal settlements, fishy purchases of Palestinian homes in villages around Jerusalem, and especially the right-wing racist and fascist governments that pass immoral laws such as the nation-state law. Boisterously get behind us to fight these struggles of ours. We on the left here have prevented Netanyahu from forming a right-wing government 4 times in the past 2 years. It's not like it appears that all Israelis love Trump and Netanyahu. We are constantly only 1 or 2 members of Knesset away from forming a center-left government that will kick out the right for many years. The news never makes anything of it. It makes no mention of our strength, do they? Once we prove to Israeli Palestinians, especially the frustrated young who attempted the lynch of a Jewish man in my neighboring city of Akko, where Zuhair's home is, that we can do it. We can do it. We will gain even more of their trust and vote to end the occupation, rescind the nation-state law, enable non-Jewish municipalities to open and benefit from industrial zones, better connect our outlying areas to the center while opening more hospitals and universities here. Your support can be the game changer. In the midst of the recent war, before our Western Galilee was hit by 2 rockets from Lebanon, 20 Jews and 20 Arabs among us handed out hundreds of flowers at our local junction, among tens of other similar demonstrations with thousands of Israelis. But you didn't see that on TV, not in the States and not in Israel. Demand to show our mutual life on TV news. We don't make news. Bombs and missiles make news. The dead make news, not those demanding that Jews and Arabs refuse to be enemies. It's time we made the news, and you must demand to air it for all Americans to support. In 2003, I edited the entire post-publication version of the Geneva Initiative Final Status Agreement, a test peace agreement already signed by high-level Palestinian and Israeli negotiators with the approval of Abu Mazen. I have spoken with him and Uri Avneri in Ramallah. I know what is possible. After updates regarding the changes on the ground, it could be our peace agreement within a few months of negotiators sitting together with a collaborative vision of a mutual future among Jews and non-Jews, Israelis and Palestinians. Please contact your senators and representatives to encourage the Biden-Harris administration to get our leaders to put negotiators back at the table. Shukran. Toda. Thank you.
Shukran, Toda. Thank you, Moshe. And I appreciate the work that you continue to do. It may be unsung here in the US, but we're going to change that politic. That's what we're here to do. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Kefa AbuKhadir. She works at Mid East. She teaches at Brunel University. She is a resident of the most celebrated, vaunted, but also contested city in the world, Jerusalem. Kefa, I turn it over to you for 3 minutes.
Hello, hi. My name is Kefa AbuKhadir. I'm a Palestinian American and I'm living here in Jerusalem. I'm a mother and an educator, and I grew up in Atlanta. I'm a 3rd-generation American. The U.S. was sanctuary to my grandfathers who fled the old empires to seek opportunity and freedom. This combined heritage has put me between Jerusalem and Atlanta. From my years in living in Jerusalem, what I have witnessed, I believe that peace is possible and the only way. But peace has eluded Jerusalem, the city of peace, because it has been sought without the consideration of justice and equality. Without these elements, never will Jerusalem live up to her name and legacy. Justice and equality come when we, all those people living in this territory, can agree on principles that we can all teach to our children. The same way I shared with other Americans a constitution and a way of life we could all be proud of together, it can happen here. I'm humbly waiting for preambles that will bring tears of joy and comfort. For every crime of segregation, I have repeated in my head the mantra that the day will come when we have some version of we the people. We will all come together in order to form a more perfect union. We will establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. How proud I am of these words. They are the knowledge that I have of the possible and not the reality that I face when I cross the threshold into here. For when I cross here, all that my fellow Americans and I hold so dear to our hearts and pledge to every morning fall off of me along with the civil liberties. For here I'm not equal. I am occupied and I have a whole system built to impede me from standing shoulder to shoulder with Israelis. It is interrogations that set me apart and having me constantly plead my humanity. As I go through checkpoints, unlawful search and seizure, taxation without representation, interrogations of occupation and apartheid, I'm constantly having to testify and answer to my society's fragmentation. They tell me how good I have it. You have Israeli citizenship, to which I answer back, I can never write my name or associate myself with Palestine. For if I say Palestine and register myself as Palestinian, I am an enemy of the state. I am subject to military rule and glass ceilings from an apartheid system that falls into place when I fill out that slot on the birth certificate or check non-Jewish. Or when I answer on job applications and opportunities for having not served in the Israeli military. Some will say to me, you have an authority. You have an authority over there. This will be answered with what I know. We have no ports. We have no control of our money flow, and we have no last word concerning our security. But you live in Jerusalem, comes the interrogation and comes the retort. There you have found solace. Yes, but although Jerusalem residents can travel within the state, they can't travel abroad freely and are not permanent. They do not have the right to come back home, and come back to the only place that they have ever known. They can leave with a travel document, but never come back, and their residency can be revoked. It's a game that has no rules or mercy. And if we cannot wait for it to end, freedom has to come now. People will tell you that I'm not the typical peace activist. I'm not. I'm ornery, I'm agitative, and I love to challenge people. Because I know that we are capable of creating the history we want to teach our children. We have two peoples living here who are hoping for a better future, but not together. We secretly and vocally hope that the other will disappear. The reality on the ground has created a never-ending farce of the savage and the outcast. The occupation and the policy of the state leaves Palestinians with no rights or equality, and Israel in the position of privileges with access to resources. The privilege, the Palestinian, is that of the savage that must constantly be tamed through administrative detention, house demolitions, house searches, and being told they never existed. And the Israeli is the outcast that will never be loved or welcomed. Day to day, we keep up this sad story in trading the role of savage and outcast. But I'm not defeated, nor will I give up hope. For as we come here today, as equals and as a loving community, we have come to show that change and all that we know will become all that we want. Thank you.
Thank you, Kefa. Let me just say, I appreciate your honoriness. If your honoriness leads to peace in the end, I appreciate your heart, your commitment, and the love that you show in all that you do. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is not a stranger to power, to politics, He is former ambassador of Israel to South Africa, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, the former Director General of the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Alon Liel. Alon, I'll give you 3 minutes. You are on mute, my brother. We have to get you off mute.
Okay. Although I'm an Israeli, I'll do my best to speak as a professional here with my diplomatic experience and analyze where we stand now after this war that we just faced. It was intensive, short, but I think might have the potential of being a game changer. Trying to sense the feeling in Israel, most of the people, or at least half of the people here, have the feeling we didn't win this war. Although we are so powerful militarily, we had achievements on the military side, on the defensive side, with the Iron Dome. But if you look at it strategically, politically, it's impossible not to notice that the Hamas and the Palestinian people had achievements, important achievements. First of all, it was very convenient for the government of Israel to have the issue, the Palestinian issue, or the Israeli-Palestinian issue shelved and not on the agenda for a very long period of time. We don't have peace talks for almost 8 years. This war has brought the topic back to the agenda. It has made Hamas a player again, and the PA, the Fatah a player again. And we see it from the American agenda. It has changed the American agenda. Blinken is here today because of this war. All the time we were told, even by good friends who believe in peace, that the Biden agenda has us very low somewhere, and here we jumped up. We jumped up, and the issue is alive again. Not only this, the two states issue is alive again. We see the day before yesterday, we had a Security Council resolution, 14 votes with America, with the United States abstaining on the two states issue, stressing the wish and the desire of the world for two states. Now this is a change, and the potential here is, and we know it from our past in the Middle East, that when the Palestinians or anyone in the region gains or regains pride, it creates an opportunity. We had it with Egypt after the 1973 war, when they had the feeling that they won, and this prepared the background for talks, and then the Sadat visit. So we have a change, a massive change. Although this event was short, it was so intensive that it is, in my eyes, a game changer. Now, I see three things that President Biden has to do now in order to enhance the chance for peace and at least re-trigger talks. One is an envoy, a Middle Eastern senior envoy, full-time envoy, close to the president. It will not work without it. Two, to engage the international community. President Biden has the ability to do it. President Trump did not have the ability to engage the world in the way Biden has, and not only the world, and I speak on not only on Europe, I speak on the rest of the world too, that is interested in solving this problem, and the UN. And the UN, we already see in the first month of President Biden that the link between the United States and the UN is different than it was in the Trump days. Trump had an effort almost to crash the UN, and Biden again is working with the UN. So I think these are two elements, and in my view, there is a third one, and by this I will conclude. I think the ability to engage both Hamas and the Fatah, the PA, in a process that will have a democratic dimension is elections. And although the May elections were postponed, I'm not sure yet what's happening with the July presidential elections. And I think this is an opportunity if the American will support Palestinian elections and will remove the Israeli veto on elections in East Jerusalem, it can create a process that will maybe bring the Palestinian into a democratic framework and enable the process to take off. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alon. It is a wonderful thing to hear from an expert in foreign affairs like you as you speak. We're now going to turn our attention to questions to the panel. As we turn to questions to the panel, we know that Alon has to leave earlier than others. So we're going to start with a question to you from my brother, Joel Siegel. Joel, you're on mute, brother.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Rodney. Alon, what an honor to just even be in your presence. What an incredible track record that you have. Former ambassador to the Palestinian Authority, Afif Safia, used to tell me that he wished for the days of Yossi Beilin and Yitzhak Rabin, and that he felt like the progressives in Israel and Palestine for years have been meeting together. They know the borders, they've drawn the lines. The Geneva Accord would be an example of a peace agreement that Israelis and Palestinians came up with a framework. The question I would like to ask you is the expansion of settlement activity in East Jerusalem and the West Bank. First of all, why is that happening? Do the Israeli people support annexation, for example, of East Jerusalem? And what can President Biden, what can we do to stop settlement activity? It is not a confidence building measure. It's going to destroy any attempt for peace. You know this more than I do or anyone else. Oh, now you're on mute. He's part of the mute club.
Myself. Okay. Thank you for the question. I would separate the issue of settlements and annexation. As you know, settlements is going on 5 decades now, and it reached a scope of over 400,000 people with a lot of political power, and it is growing almost by itself with a lot of political backing. And until we'll have an agreement or a different American policy, it will go on. Annexation did not have the amount of support that settlements is having, and it was touch and go. And we know that with a very brilliant idea of the Emirates with some American help, it was blocked for the time being, and I hope blocked forever. So just to relate to the question, I think the settlement process, to stop it without an agreement is impossible at the moment. Annexation, we can prevent it. I think as long as Biden is there, and as long as we want to keep the peace agreements that Israel reached recently, the agreements, I don't have to call it peace agreement, with the Emirates and Bahrain and Sudan and Morocco and so on. So I think it's two different issues. But just a comment, when you spoke, I thought on another thing, that we need an ambassador, an American ambassador to Israel urgently. Because when you ask the question, the previous American ambassador to Israel was the main engine on the settlement issue and the main engine on the annexation issue. And now we need an ambassador that will undo the damage of the previous one. And it has to be fast if we want to succeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's a wonderful response there. And it gives us great guidance on what we need to do. I want to start off with questions to everyone. And just because Alon has to leave, I'm going to start with him to make sure we get him in before he has to walk away. But I'm an African American. I live in America in a racialized system. I understand what it's like to live with trauma around you, and trauma impacts you. It affects your life. You all live with trauma. What is it like living in a war zone right now? How does it impact you emotionally? I'll start with you, Alon, and then we'll work our way around.
Look, I think I'm the wrong person to be asked, because I live in a Jewish city, not in a mixed city, and I was out of the radius of the missiles. So if I sensed at all, kind of personally, it through family, especially through the grandchildren who were quite often in the shelters, and I saw the emotional effect. But I must be honest here. I think since the Iron Dome is effective in the last 2-3 rounds, except the people, the Israelis around Gaza, who really have no routine, especially during these rounds, but even sometimes between the rounds, the Israeli public hardly really feels the war. This time we had the Mixed Cities event, but I think Israel can afford a war, especially because the Israeli public can absorb such a round. In the past, when we had thousands of casualties in a war, the government could not stand the pressure. Now, as you know, the defense, because of the defense, and by the way, this time also the offense was very chirurgic in a way that the numbers of casualties in Gaza is also lower than in previous rounds. So it's a kind of a scientific type of a war with less casualties than we had in the past, and the Israeli public is especially sensitive to casualties. So I think this is also one of the things I sense. We go back to normal very fast. We are back to normal. We put COVID behind us, we put the missiles behind us, and this is the reason we have a chance now to build a government, a different government that will be open to peace and to come back to this agenda very fast, because we don't have a long process of healing, of a nation healing as a result of it. I hope also on the internal front, but definitely not on the national front regarding casualties or damage.
Thank you so much. Let me ask this question of Hiam.
To tell you the truth, I'm still thinking of what happened here in the mixed cities like Haifa and Akko. Zuhair also could add. It's a trauma over a trauma. I couldn't imagine. I was, sitting at night and listening to all the riots and the sabotage, what was happening. I couldn't believe that. I said, is it my Haifa? Because usually Haifa is like the light in the Middle East. Always we have a wonderful coexistence. We live Muslims, the Christians, Baha'is, whatever you want, lives for over than 70 years. I don't say nothing, but usually the Haifa people are very related to each other. To see this situation, it made me feel so bad that could it happen to us? Why? But from the other side, I can tell you that it was just a bunch of kids, kids who felt alienated, who felt that they are stepsons of the state, because the state never took them to their heart and say, you are my kids. So these kids found a fertile earth in order to express their anger and their frustration. I don't accept that, and plenty of our leaders didn't accept that, but it was really an instant which I say that we, the Arab world, the Arab leaders, we have to sit and think to get together how to change these things, because it's not real. It's not what happened. It's not usually happening here in our land. So it's a bit sad, but I feel we are going to overcome. We shall overcome.
Amen. I love that line. We shall overcome. I see.
One sentence on this, especially if we'll have Netanyahu as our prime minister in the next government too. I am worried that the anti-peace forces in Israel, especially a spinner like Netanyahu, will take the problem we have internally as an excuse not to proceed with the Palestinians and say Israel is bleeding now. We have first to solve our internal problem, and only then we can go to external issues. It worries me, and I hope it will not happen. Sorry.
Thank you for that, and thank you for being with us. I know you'll probably have to leave before we get back to you.
Sorry, another Zoom. Sorry.
I understand. Michal.
Yes, I want to say that on a personal note, like Alon says, I live in a city that did get missile this round, and of course I live in my privileged home with a bomb shelter, and we can compare our situation to Gaza and Alon, I'm sorry, but 2,000 people, a lot of them children and women, are enormous number anyway of that people. So but I do want to say about what happened in the mixed towns in Israel, and that's worried me even more. Everything is of course connected. My son lives in Jaffa, and he had to flee out from his home to come and stay with us because he was afraid to stay there. But I think you need to be blind in the last years in Israel not to understand that it's going to happen this way or another. Because if you look at the organized crime in the Arab society in Israel, if you look at so many dead people because of private guns, and no police force are able to enforce law and order in a lot of villages and Arab towns. You need to be blind not to see the discrimination in work, in budget, in everything through the Arab Palestinian society in Israel. And like Zuhair Balu says, after the national law that set it out and clear that there is a difference between me as a Jew in Israel, as a citizen, to him as an Arab, I think that was the match that just blew everything. All of this together, all the frustration of the Arab Palestinian society in Israel just blow up with, of course, what happened in East Jerusalem with Al-Aqsa Mosque and Sheikh Jarrah problem. And at the end, we know the people that participate in the riots from the Jewish part and from the Arab part are young people that just, waited and took the opportunity just to riot and to hurt people. But I think a lot of us that do have good connection and do believe in coexist Arab Jews in Israel and live together and want to promote the Arab Palestinian society to a better position to have an equality in Israel, I think we suffered a huge strike this time, and it will take time to overcome it. But I want to say in the optimist view that this last Saturday, thousands and thousands of people were marching in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, a lot of places in the country, Palestinian Arabs and Jews marching together, saying Jews and Arabs are not enemies and we want to live together. So I think a lot of organization, of course, Meretz Party was part of the organizing that organized that. But I think there is hope but we got like a huge punch this time, and it will take time to overcome it. We need another government. We need another leaders. You know, we need leaders that believe in peace, that believe in living together, and believe in another future to Israel. And that's, you know, for now, I don't see it yet. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that that honest answer, Michael. I want to ask Zuhair about this question. And then I'd like to, just because of time, I want to move on to another question. Zuhair. You're on mute.
Yes, I have two additional remarks about all of this conversation. Very, very important conversation. First of all, the big achievement of the Benjamin Netanyahu government is that he succeeded to disappear the word of the occupation from the dictionary of the scene in Israel. Nobody speaking in Israel about the occupation. The occupation, in my opinion, is the poison of the scene between or inside the debate between the Palestinian people and the Israeli people, and also between us as citizens in Israel within this debate. So Benjamin Netanyahu convinced the Israeli community that there is a right of the Israeli people or government or authority to have the occupation, the settlements. This is the express reality in order to convince the people that Israel has the right to have those settlements or settlers. This is the first remarks. Secondly, I think about the coexistent cities in Israel. We have 6 or 7 coexistence cities in Israel, and what's happened recently is a citizen war between the both sides, between the Jewish people and the Arab people inside Israel. It's a very sad scene that we have suddenly, because nobody expected this developments that we see, what we have seen recently. And I think the main reason about that is one word: the equality. There is no equality between the both communities.
Yes.
The lowest position is for the Arab people, and the highest is for the Jewish people. When you have no equality in your country, there is no democracy, there is no justice, and it is a very, very, let I see, very quick in order to make the fire that we had recently.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, and that necessary rejoinder to that question, Zuhair. I want to ask Moshe. Moshe, we often hear in America that the Israelis and Palestinians can never achieve peace because they've been at war for years. I mean, I've heard people say millennia, and simply do not want peace. And people say that peace is impossible. Do you believe that people will be fighting forever, or do you believe that there's a chance for peace?
I know that there's a chance for peace. If we look at our Egyptian neighbors, Egypt was the largest, was our main enemy. Egypt attacked us when we declared independence in 1948, and it was the largest army, maybe still is, the largest army in the Middle East. Yet, with American help, President Carter gave us the opportunity through the vision of the Egyptian success and victory in the Yom Kippur or the October War. Once they felt that they had succeeded and won, then they could come proudly to the negotiating table. And Carter made a point of putting that in the face of a very right-wing prime minister. And here we are today with both sides saying that they've won, with the Hamas in Gaza dancing, and more than ever before, they have a feeling like they really won. And obviously, most of the Israelis also think that we have really won. So I see an opportunity here that I think that Mr. Blinken is banking on. He's come not just to ensure the ceasefire or talk about the ceasefire or just to bring money or whatever. He's come here to leverage a long-term peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And I think that's fabulous. If we look at other examples of France and Germany who fought 2 world wars against each other, and today there's no border between them. They're not one state, but they're almost the same. They're part of the same European Union. And I think that it is possible. I'm sure that it is possible. And I'm like Michal. I find the optimism in the situation. And I must say that I've never been so depressed in my life than to hear the violence outside my window. I mean, my window was open and I'm watching the violence happening in the neighbor city of Zuhair's city of Akko. And I'm hearing the violence and I'm watching it live on TV. I was choked. I can't imagine it. And when we finally convinced most of the Israelis, most of the people living in Akko, that these were not people from Akko who did the violence. There was a Jew who was there was an attempted lynch upon a Jew. There was an attempted lynch upon an Arab. And these were outside forces. So although the fact that they were able to come in and be so violent is horrific, I don't think it necessarily means that our social weave is necessarily becoming unfrayed. We're not falling apart. I think that it does actually tell everyone now is the time to start dealing with this in reality. It's not just the police who don't enter Arabic cities. Rent-a-car companies don't go into Arabic cities, and they're pretty much when it's dark, done. You don't need to put a fence or a gate. Most Jews will not be going in there, and that's not good. And the government has not taken care of it. And so it's time to start not just punishing our Arab citizens. It's time to start supporting them. And they are requesting that the police go in and take care of the violence the way they take care of Jewish violence. So I'm encouraged, and we must put the pressure on them. And the best way to put the pressure on them, on our government, is to make sure that the left in America starts encouraging the whole way. Don't stop with just a ceasefire, because it can explode, as we saw, in just a few minutes. So we know that Mr. Netanyahu loves nothing more than to get everybody afraid in Israel. And all of a sudden, when in the Western movie, you see the arrow go by, and all of a sudden the leader in the wagon train going out into the west, he says, "Encircle the wagons. We're being attacked." So everyone has to feel like they must defend Israel immediately. I've lost that back in 1982 when I was sent into Lebanon. It took me 3 times before I refused to go back to Lebanon. And although Beirut is beautiful, I'd love to go back with a passport. We must not be kept constantly in this fear of us hating each other and fearing the entire world. Let's make ourselves worthy of the world's love and worthy of the world's respect. Let's be that beacon of hope for the rest of the world. We can do it, and we must do it, and soon.
Amen, amen. You made me feel hopeful just speaking there. Kefa, what do you think?
Am I on mute? Okay. First of all, that we can't achieve peace. I think it depends on how you define peace. If it's more or less that they want us to acquiesce or just to be quiet. And in the past, that's what we felt, that basically peace was just us being quiet and not being awarded or given what is ours, which is our rights and equality. I think that's the problem now. And according to the violence and what I saw, I was also up north. And there's a lot of people who were organizing what was happening. Because the reason is that we want an intifada. We want an intifada throughout all of historic Palestine. And people want to resist and they want to be heard. And they want some type of resistance that is seen and heard because they have been protesting and they have been speaking out and nobody's hearing them. The PA, when we're talking about peace, the PA is not structured to more or less represent me or any other Palestinian. It's more or less a management authority. and it's just to maintain the ghettos. And it's not a representational democracy. If you ask any Palestinian, they have no idea how it works. So I don't understand how it's going to be a component for peace. Usually in schools, they teach kids how their government works. That does not happen in Palestinian schools. They do not teach them how the PA works. Have we been fighting forever? No. That is a fallacy, and that's basically been erected since 48. And that's also it usually goes with the other talking point that we don't exist. Do we not want peace? And is peace not possible? Again, not wanting peace, we have to go back and we have to be able to sit across from each other as equals and with equity in each other, invested in each other, so that we can define what peace is. And we are the people who greet each other and with the word peace. So the word peace in Arabic and in Hebrew has a lot more weight than it does in English. So when you say shalom or salam, it's not like when you're saying peace comes from the Latin pax. And pax means I'm weaponless. So when the Romans would greet each other with the word pax, has totally different meaning than when an Arab or a Jew greet each other with the word shalom. So shalom or salam is basically perfection or the face of God, because it's one of the names of God. So for us, it's a totally different concept. And that, I am a little bit more secular, but we are in the Holy Land. So bringing that, and I think that's what I'm seeking, is some type of perfection and something that we can all be proud of, because we do have a heritage, we do have a shared heritage, and how do we honor that? That's peace.
Amen. Thank you for that. And I, of course, appreciate you going to the religious roots there. That always inspires me. But let me do this. Let me turn over to Joel Siegel to ask you've got some particular questions that you wanted to ask. Let me do that. And then I want to go to the audience and have some audience questions.
Thank you, Brother Rodney. Kefa, what is it like to live in your ancestral village that was annexed into the Jerusalem municipality, but not into the state of Israel? And the second question is, what is it like for you to feel stateless or to feel like you don't have a home? Because I think one of the challenges we have to get a re-energized peace movement, the American Jewish community has to have much more empathy and compassion for what it's like to be occupied. I have a friend of my family who said, I just got back from Palestine. There is no occupation, doesn't exist. What is it like to go through what you go through on a daily basis?
First of all, what is the occupation? First of all, I have Israeli citizenship. And the reason why I have Israeli citizenship is so that I could stay. Because if we did not, if we had residency, we wouldn't really be allowed to leave. So I do have dual citizenship, and part of that citizenship, part of my samud, is my steadfastness, is so that I wouldn't have to pay the outrageous fees or the visa applications. Like when I first got married, it was very hard for somebody to stay here. So most of the people that I got that were here, I mean, there are people who are applying for up to 20 years for residency to stay with their spouses and their children. What does it feel like to be under occupation? Well, I did grow up in the South, and I did grow up with a strong attachment to the African American community, and they always were part of our activities as Palestinians. And a lot of what I heard from veterans from the Civil Rights Movement, and from when my father went to the States. When my father went to the States, there was still segregation, and they would tell him to go to the colored section because they could never figure out what he was. So I also had that narrative when my father came. And that's what it feels like here, because there's a lot of it that's hidden, and there's a lot of it that's very in your face. In Jerusalem, there's a lot of bureaucracy and there's a lot of fines. And getting your house demolished, I've had 2 houses demolished. And, and then you don't get a lot of sympathy from Israelis, because they'll tell you something like, well, why didn't you apply for a permit? But if I'm going to apply for a permit, it's going to cost me more than building the house. And there's all these mechanisms that are put into place, and you're constantly in this stupid guessing game of how to get through them. So it is like living in the Jim Crow South. Some parts of it are a little bit more sophisticated than others. And in the West Bank, it's a lot more in your face and physical. So, and the other thing is that I grew up with Jews as my equals, and they grew up with my neighbors and my best friends. And here they are my occupier. And I had no way how to explain that to my children, because they grew up here and then they're in the States now. So they figured it out. But growing up here really messed up. I mean, like in the last few weeks, my son, so basically, like it blows my mind to tell them you need to hide because the Jews are coming. Okay, because that is like that's anti-Semitic. That is weird. It's against my principles. But our town was being attacked by some settler group, and they shot 2 people. And it was like a regression. I couldn't. I mean, there was lawlessness. We couldn't call the police. Also, I will bring this up because my cousin is AbuKhadir, who was kidnapped and burned. So, and that was a result of the fact that we called the police, the same people that kidnapped him. We had called the police. I'm saying we as a community, not me personally. To come, these people had attempted to kidnap a woman and her 2 children the night before. If the police had done their job, these people wouldn't have kidnapped Muhammad the next day. When we did call him, when Muhammad's parents did call him, call the police, the evidence was confiscated. I mean, this is his case is details exactly how the system works and is constantly working against us. So, and I love the fact that I'm living in my home, because we never left Jerusalem. My grandparents and my grandfathers left here, but we never left Jerusalem. We always had a foot here. So somebody's always here. And we weren't annexed into I'm closing up, so making sure I answer the question. And not being annexed into the Jerusalem municipality is Israel being irresponsible, because we don't have sanitation. We're not taken care of well. Our olive orchards, the olive trees that my grandfathers planted, are just spewing sewage. And we have trees that are hundreds of years old and just covered in sewage. And that is not what I want to see. We're capable of better.
Thank you very much. We're going to go into our Q&A session. This is a very brief, real brief question, real brief answer. You know, to have the former MK from Labor Party, Zuhair Balu, and then Mikhail Rosen, that's rare on these kind of symposiums. I want to ask a very quick question. How important is it that President Biden and the U.S. Congress and the American Jewish community put moral persuasion on Biden to intervene now, not in a few years, now, to see some kind of a result where the Israelis and the Palestinians can come to the peace table and sign a final status agreement? And if you were speaking to President Biden and the Congress right now, what would you tell them? Zuhair. I believe he's on mute.
You're on mute, my brother.
The president, okay, President Biden is the most important leader over the world. So he can change and he can be the game changer. And this is his duty, I think, in order to maintain the status of him, in order to make an impact in our region. This is the first. Secondly, I think the Jewish community in the United States can make some influence about the Democratic Party in order to be more active in Israel and to convince Benjamin Netanyahu and maybe the new government, because we have the possibility to change our government during these days, to change the mind about the rights of the Palestinian community, the Palestinian nation, having a homeland and to be as the other nation over the world, with rights, with the government, with the status, with independence, and so on and so forth. So I think this is my advice about the world community, the American community, and especially about the role of the new president, President Biden.
Thank you so much, MK Bilal. And Mikkel, your take.
Yes, I want to say that I think for years, some of the progressive Americans, especially in the Jewish community, felt that if you criticize Israel, it means you're against Israel. Mm-hmm. And as a leftist in Israel that has suffered a lot of incitement from the right-wing government, I have to say that to be pro-peace is to be pro-Israel, you know, and to criticize the government in a good way and say we want you to have a better future, and that's why we want to take care that you have peace and peace negotiation. I think it's to be pro-Israel. We saw what happens in the last year with Trump administration. He gave Israel a free card to do whatever we want, almost everything we want. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem and gave the statement of Jerusalem being Israel capital. And we saw that nothing changed in his rule. It's not that we got a better situation in Israel. We didn't get a better situation with the Palestinian Authority. Of course, we didn't solve the situation with Gaza and the Hamas. So what did it help us to tell us you're wonderful, you're great, you are right, and to do like this all the time to Netanyahu? Nothing changed. If someone from the right wing will tell me, look, for 5 years, we solved the problem with the Palestinian occupied territories, and we solved the problem with Hamas, and we prospered everything here, I would say, you know what, maybe I was wrong. But we saw that even though the Trump administration gave us free card to do whatever we want, and still nothing changed and even get worse. So I think, in every, like I said in the beginning, every poll, every survey shows that the majority of the Israelis think that there's no other way unless the two-state solution. The problem is that there are less faithful now and less believers because of the reality. But that's why we need a leader to give us the inspiration. I had the privilege to be a young girl working the Knesset when Rabin has his government and proceeding peace with our neighbor. And I think the situation in Israel and the people way of thinking didn't change so much. It wasn't another time that people thought peace is around the corner, but still he was brave enough to say, I were in the field of war, and I prefer to be in the field of peace. And also Begin said that. So I think we need the leaders to be brave enough in both sides, in the Palestinian Authority and Israel, and to go for the peace resolution, because that's the only way we can get out of this vicious circle.
Brother Rodney, may I just say 2 quick points here? One is that I've been speaking on right-wing radio in Israel for the last few days, and I have to remind them, when you and the right wing in Israel objected to the Obama government and you spoke against the Obama government, you even sent your prime minister to come and work behind his back, nobody considered you anti-American. And when we opposed the Trump government, nobody considered us anti-American. Now, why is it that if you criticize the government of Israel, you're automatically anti-Israeli, which also makes it automatically anti-Semitic? So please understand, among friends, which the United States and Israel are, we are allowed to disagree, and we are allowed to express our opinion of how we think things should be. So there is no such thing as not being allowed to or automatically being called anti-Semitic. The other point I wanted to make was that I'd like to speak to people who consider themselves either pro-Israel or pro-Palestinian. It's my opinion that to be pro-Israel, you also have to be pro-Palestinian, because if one side in our conflict wins, both sides lose. Both sides lose. It will continue until both sides realize that they have lost too much and they have too much to win, and the negotiating teams have whittled down to the bare bone and say, we can't give up anymore, can you? And then they both agree and say, yeah, let's sign an agreement and get it over with. There's no reason to continue. So that's where I think that we should be going. And I encourage everyone to not be pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli, to be both, because the two real sides of this conflict are those who will agree eventually to make painful concessions and those who won't. Those who will create the peace. We have to convince the others that they must join us. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. I just want to say thank you right now. Thank you, Moshe, for that brilliant statement. Thank you all. I wanted to have you all sort of give a final statement, but we're getting close to the end of the hour. But I do want to just say thank you to each of you. How about if I ask you all for one word to just sort of sum up what we need to do next? What do you think we need to do next? I'm just going to go around the screen. Mikhail, what do you think we need to do next?
Sorry, yes. What we have to do is what we are praying for doing for the last 25 years, I think, is to sit down, to negotiate with the other side.
So, negotiate. Thank you. That's
negotiate. Yes.
One word, Hiam.
I agree that they have to sit and to talk. And I have to say something to Biden, the new governor,
yes.
Because we here in Israel, we feel that Big Daddy or Big Brother, is the United States. Now I think he has to influence Netanyahu, the minister over here, because now while Israel is strong, we can make peace. The Arab world won't be weak in another 50 years. This is why they have to influence. If Israel wants to stay here in the Middle East and to survive between the Arab world, now is the timing. This is what you have to say to the congressmen and to senators and to everyone in the United States.
Amen. Thank you. Kiefer, what do you say?
What do I say? Rebuild Gaza. Because I'm co-founder for an online education company, and we employ teachers from Gaza, and none of them have been able to work since the war. So rebuild Gaza and help us build our private sector so that we can become stronger and we can earn our own dignity and get off of donations.
Amen.
Rebuild Gaza, rebuild Gaza.
Rebuild. Zuhair, what's your one word?
I think he's on mute.
You're on mute.
Now it's okay?
Yes.
President Joe Biden, please come to our area now, immediately, in order to create something else, something change, in order to convince us that there is no way, only one way, the peace.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'm going to, right now, let me do this. I'm going to turn it over to Moshe, and then I'll do closing comments after Moshe. Moshe.
Thank you. Okay, we presented an event that you might not find anywhere else. We have a special thank you to say to Brother Joel Siegel. This monthly symposium was his baby. He's worked on it for over a year pretty constantly when he wasn't busy authoring legislation for protection and progress on civil rights, healthcare, or the environment. He's been at it on the Hill for many years, coming up against those who would hold back the United States from progressing to where it deserves to be. He's been threatened and intimidated by big organizations and rich interests, but found the way to get the job done. Just for one example, his work, one example of his work was the Medicare for All bill that has changed the lives for tens of thousands of Americans. And he's working on all sorts of bills as soon as this meeting is concluded. But his passion for Israeli and Palestinian peace goes back to his upbringing and work with Congressman Conyers from Michigan. Joel worked with the Israelis, the Palestinian Authority, the Gazans here on this side of the pond, and with everybody. So Joel, congratulations. I'm very happy that we got here for you, if for no other reason. Let's give our thanks to our hosts, the Union Presbyterian Seminary. Excuse me. I'd also like to mention the names of our preparation team, people who've participated along the way: Joel Siegel, Hiam Tanus, Rodney Sadler, Dr. Rodney, Kefa AbuKhadir, Larry Imberman, Nitza Basha, Uri Zaki, Ron Ziv, Eli Safran, Mosi Raz, Yair Goland, and others who I apologize for having left out. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Moshe. I really appreciate it. Fatima, would you like to give a closing statement? You're on mute.
Yes. Where is it? Yes. I want to thank all of you again for being here today. It means you care, and we deeply appreciate it. We know that this issue matters to you because you're here, and your presence here today really matters because peace matters. I hope you've been impacted by the personal stories, authentic perspectives, and passion for peace that you've heard from our amazing speakers who come from the incredible microcosm that is Israel and Palestine. Their courage to stand up and persistence to work together towards equality, justice, unity, and a just and sustainable peace that will benefit everyone comes from the heart. Personally, I was blown away by their candor that helps us better understand their daily realities. We need to support them, and just as they have, approach the process of peace with a spirit of honesty, sincerity, respect, compassion, openness, and generosity to build a common environment of trust and assuming goodwill, the critical first steps to an honest conversation. And most important, never giving up. We can influence the environment in which new generations come into this world, grow up, and live. We have an opportunity to make a difference now. Now is the time. In particular, for those living in the US, please weigh in and contact your members of Congress. And as a proud Biden delegate, one who is regularly engaged with my Jewish and Muslim sisters and brothers toward a common understanding that leads to love and an increasing appreciation of our common humanity, and one whose faith informs my activism for peace and justice, I implore you to contact the White House and let them know how important peace is to you and how important a return to the negotiation table is to all of us. To quote the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And yes, inequalities anywhere are a threat to equality everywhere. It sets a sadly profound precedent. As a year of lockdown from a virus that knew no boundaries has shown all of us, none of us are immune. Everyone is affected, however tangentially, when there is no peace. Let's continue to keep our focus on our common humanity and work together to demand a sustainable peace. Let's reject the zero-sum game that has divided our communities. Encourage unity, encourage dialogue, and above all, stay connected to our upcoming symposia, which will continue to address how we can collectively debunk myths, highlight our common humanity, and a way forward that embraces love and a spiritual bond that fuels our passion for peace. Once again, your presence matters. Thank you again for being here. Salam, shalom, namaste. Peace be upon all of you. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you so much, Fatima. That was wonderful. It was absolutely, I love the way that Moshe gave himself a hug there. Joel Siegel, you talk about a sense of the House resolution. Oh, we can't hear you, brother.
Sorry. Fantastic, everybody. Round of applause to everyone. I've been doing congressional briefings, hearings for whatever 20 years. I think this is one of the best ones I've ever participated in. If we're going to move the Congress and President Biden to really engage seriously in the peace process between Israel and Palestine, we're going to have to hear, especially from the American Jewish community. I want to thank J Street, by the way, and all the great Jewish organizations, Arab organizations, Palestinian interfaith, been working on this for decades. We all have to work together now. But we are going to have a Senate of the House resolution and the Senate calling on Biden to bring Israelis and Palestinians to the peace table. Why is this important? It's very simple, very clear. This gives those of us, the peace forces, here and overseas, a chance to weigh in and make your voice heard that peace must be a priority. I'm going to say this with a little bit of sadness, but a little bit of hope. I did write the first resolution for a Republican member of Congress who is now not among us. His name was Walter Jones. When we introduced the resolution, it called for a two-state solution and for Obama to engage in diplomacy. That was it. But a very far right-wing organization who will remain nameless from the Jewish community put the kibosh and put so much pressure on Representative Walter Jones, we had to withdraw the resolution. We cannot have that happen again. We need all voices at the table, no matter who you are. And this is a first step in making sure that we can move the needle like we're talking about. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate this event. I appreciate you all. I think that the dominant theme I've heard from everyone today is the notion that we need to use love speech. We need to recognize that we are sisters and that we are brothers of the same God, the same creator. We come from, many of you all on the screen come from the same land, the same ancestry. We need to come together and recognize that similarity, find a path towards peace. And those of us in this nation here in the United States of America have to work for peace. I think we have a slide that tells us where we can call. I'm going to ask everybody that's here today to do something. I want you to call the White House. I want you to call the White House and ask the Biden administration, please make sure that the Israelis and Palestinians get back to the table. The number's right here. It's a very simple number to remember. 202-456-4111. 202-456-4111. I think there's a 4 missing there. But we need to make sure that you get into make these phone calls. Let the Biden administration know what it is that we want. We want peace. We want them to push for peace. And we know that if they push for peace, peace will finally come in Israel-Palestine. As we prepare to go today, I want to remind anybody that's out there watching that we are in the middle of a week where we're arguing for issues of social justice. Tomorrow at 12 o'clock, right here again, we will be having the Reverend Dr. Alan Bosak come to speak to us for the second time. Tomorrow's conversation will be called Wrestling with Race and Anti-Apartheid. An anti-apartheid specialist speaks to the American racial situation. And he's going to tell us a little bit about what kind of work went in place to overcome apartheid in South Africa and the kinds of work that we need to do in America to deal with the issue of race and racial disparity. I invite you all to come back and join with us for that conversation. And that's supposed to be a dialogue. We want a whole lot of questions from the audience so that we can make sure that we truly learn from this brilliant man, this brilliant strategist who's engaged in the kind of work that we're doing for peace here today. Thank you all. God bless, and look forward to seeing you again soon for another installation of this symposium.
Thank you. Shukran.